Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely fascinating slice of history. We're looking at how a small band of Phoenician refugees sailed across the Mediterranean and built a mercantile empire so incredibly wealthy, powerful, and advanced that its greatest rival, Rome, felt compelled to completely wipe it off the map. I mean, they literally burned it to the ground to erase its legacy entirely. We're talking, of course, about Carthage. Let's look at exactly how they rose to such incredible heights. To really wrap your head around just how thoroughly Rome destroyed Carthage, consider the 19th century French novelist Gustave Flaubert. When he visited North Africa to write a book set in the ancient city, he completely despaired. He wrote, "Just think of what I've let myself in for to resuscitate an entire civilization with nothing whatsoever to go on." He was standing on the ruins of what was once the preeminent superpower of the ancient Mediterranean, and there was almost nothing left to see. That total, utter destruction sets up one of the great historical mysteries for us. How did this doomed city originally become such an unprecedented powerhouse? Section 1. The Purple People. Origins in the Levant. To understand Carthage's meteoric rise, we actually have to start with their ancestors, the Phoenicians. And their story doesn't begin in Africa, but on the stony, cedar-covered shores of Lebanon in the eastern Mediterranean. And the thing that really kick-started their entire civilization, well, it boils down to a pretty staggering number, 50 kilograms. That is exactly how many rotting, foul-smelling murex sea snails it took to produce just a single gram of Tyrian purple dye. I mean, just imagine the sheer effort involved there, not to mention the unbelievable stench. But because the extraction process was so agonizingly difficult, this dye became an insanely expensive luxury item. It was prized by kings and emperors across the ancient world, and it eventually became the absolute signature color of royalty. And this actually illustrates exactly where their name came from. The Greeks named these cunning maritime traders after their most famous product. They called them the Phoenicians, which comes from the ancient Greek word phoinake. That translates roughly to the makers of purple, or literally, the purple people. It was this relentless, highly lucrative dye trade that pushed the Phoenicians out onto the open seas in the first place, because they were desperate to find more of these snails and discover entirely new markets to sell their precious cargo. Section 2. The Myth and the Reality, a Startup City. So, as these merchants expanded their search for resources, they were also desperately trying to escape the brutal tribute demands of the terrifying Assyrian Empire back home. These wealthy merchants really needed a safe haven in the West. Now, the romantic myth of how they founded this new city tells us that Queen Dido fled her murderous brother, landed in Africa, and cleverly tricked a local king into giving her a massive plot of land by cutting a single ox hide into razor-thin strips. It's a fantastic, legendary story, right? It perfectly highlights their reputation for shrewd bargaining. But the reality? Well, archaeological evidence reveals Carthage was actually a highly calculated, strategic colonial expansion by the Phoenician city of Tyre around 814 BCE. They were intentionally setting up shop to secure those lucrative Western trade routes. Section 3. A geographically perfect city. Location, location, location. Let me tell you, the site they chose for this new settlement was an absolute masterstroke of geographical positioning. They didn't just pick some random stretch of beach. They claimed what might have literally been the most valuable real estate in the ancient world. Carthage had the ultimate blend of features for an ancient startup city. It was perfectly sheltered in the massive natural harbor of the Bay of Tunis, which protected their invaluable fleets from both bad weather and enemy ships. Plus, it was built on sheer red cliffs, giving them immediate natural defenses against any land invasions. It also boasted incredibly rich agricultural land watered by the Mijata River, meaning they could easily feed a booming population. But most importantly, it was the ultimate crossroads. It sat exactly midway between Tyre in the east and the wealthy silver mines of Spain in the west, putting them right on the doorstep of the super lucrative Sicilian and Sardinian trade routes. And when we look at artifacts dug up from the very earliest layers of the city, like this fragmented pottery, it tells an incredible story. These pieces prove that Carthage didn't start slow. It was never just some isolated little outpost. From day one, it was immediately plugged into a massive, interconnected web of trade reaching Greece, Italy, Spain, and the Levant. They absolutely hit the ground running. Section 4. The First Mercantile Superpower. Capitalism of Antiquity. From what was originally just a humble collection of mud brick buildings on a cliff, Carthage rapidly evolved into a total economic juggernaut. But here's what makes them so unique. Unlike Rome or Syria, Carthage relied primarily on commerce, not conquest, to project its power. They were essentially practicing a form of ancient capitalism. If we trace this rapid rise, we start in 814 BCE as a simple colony paying annual tribute back to Tyre. But as Tyre falls onto the boot of Eastern empires, refugees and wealth come flooding directly into Carthage. By the 6th century BCE, it blossoms into a wealthy, completely self-sufficient empire. By 509 BCE, they're powerful enough to sign an equal diplomatic treaty with a young, minor republic you might have heard of, Rome. And by 410 BCE, Carthage is minting its very own silver coins, proudly stamping them with a palm tree, which was a deliberate nod to their ancient Phoenician roots. Over just a few centuries, they went from a tribute-paying outpost to an absolute superpower. So what exactly drove this phenomenal rise? Honestly, it was a culture of brilliant commercial and technological innovation. Carthage really did operate like an ancient startup. Just look at their economics. They literally pioneered interest-bearing loans and maritime insurance policies. Think about that. If a merchant's fleet was lost to a terrible storm or vicious pirates, these ancient policies ensured they weren't totally financially ruined. That kind of safety net encouraged incredible risk-taking and rapid expansion. Technologically, they developed curved ship hulls, waterproofed with bitumen, and they fearlessly navigated the open ocean using the pole star, while everyone else was nervously hugging the coastlines. They even utilized highly advanced agricultural science, which was meticulously documented by a famous Carthaginian writer named Mogo, to absolutely maximize the yields from their fertile lands. But out of all those game-changing innovations, perhaps their most impactful was a surprisingly simple one: the 22-letter phonetic alphabet. Before this, writing was ridiculously cumbersome. You had to rely on elite, highly trained scribes who spent years and years learning hundreds of complex Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform symbols. The Phoenician Carthaginian alphabet was a masterclass in simplicity. It essentially democratized business. It allowed everyday merchants to easily read, write, and maintain complex contracts across the sea without needing to hire an imperial scribe. It was such a brilliant idea that the Greeks eventually adopted it, meaning this ancient writing system is actually the direct foundation of all the Western alphabets we use today. Pretty wild, right? Now, this intense focus on trade heavily influenced their politics too. Unlike the aggressive, bloodthirsty warrior empires of their time, Carthage was an oligarchic republic governed by wealthy citizens and merchants. They actively avoided hereditary royalty and dictatorships. Why? Because war is terrible for business. It disrupts trade routes, it drains treasuries, and it sinks incredibly valuable ships. So they relied heavily on diplomacy and treaties to prevent prolonged conflicts. When they absolutely had to fight to protect their interests, they simply used their immense commercial wealth to hire mercenaries and foreign troops. This kept their own citizens safely at home, focused on doing what they did best, making money. Section 5. The Legacy of a Merchant Empire Shaping the Mediterranean. Ultimately, as we know, this mercantile approach violently collided with the militaristic expansion of Rome, leading to the devastating Punic Wars and Carthage's total destruction. But the legacy of this merchant empire shaped the Mediterranean forever. Even in victory, the Romans were forced to adopt Carthaginian ship designs just to compete. They implemented Mago's advanced agricultural techniques, and they essentially just took over the vast trade networks that Carthage had so painstakingly built, using them to sustain the Roman Empire for centuries. Which leaves us with a fascinating final thought to ponder. Had this ancient empire of merchants prevailed over Rome's empire of legions, would our modern world have been shaped entirely by commerce, trade, and diplomacy rather than military conquest? It is an absolute, incredible what-if of history. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.